Hey, I'm Grant and welcome to the Stay the Channel for September 25th. So I guess the big news is I finally put out the Digression Bar podcast. That is rolling and it should be coming out every other Friday starting from last Friday. So still a lot to talk about on that. Right now I'm still waiting approval for both the iTunes and Google Play services so that you can actually go to there and see the podcast. Until then, you can actually go to the audio link to the the manual RSS feed if you want to just download it manually to a podcast app. I'll probably publicize that somewhere on the Digression Bar page on my site. Otherwise, I'm also working this week I want to have 2 web forms added to the site to submit questions and suggestions. One is going to be for the Digression Bar, so you can say like, oh, I want to have a question for Grant, and we'll read it on the podcast and we'll answer it and have a little fun. And the other one is I want to, for that OSRS blind series, I want to make that something that people can really submit things. That's something that when I originally put it out, that was what was so valuable, was that people were like, oh, you should go make him try and do this, or he should go try and kill this boss. And even though I didn't get around to it originally, I still think that that would be a really good function, that you can go to this website and be like, hey, you should make him do this, give him this equipment and see what happens. So I'm hoping to get that up today because it's something I haven't done yet on the site before, but I think shouldn't be too hard. Otherwise, I'm just going to be cleaning up a bunch of the stuff on the site this week, as well as prepping for the next podcast. So since it's every 2 weeks, I need to make sure we have a really good flow. I think we're going to film it this weekend, and then that'll give me it'll probably give me like 5-6 days to edit it all and put it back together. I definitely got out of the rhythm because for the test podcast, those were done like week after week, which is good, but I originally moved it out because one, I wanted more time. Like each week became that every week was just about getting this done. I didn't have room for much else. But also for the audio podcast, I hosted through a service called Libsyn, which is about $5 a month, which is not something I mind paying, but it does mean I have a 50 megabyte limit on all my uploads per month. Well, if we want to do an hour-long podcast at a semi-decent quality, that means it's going to be about 20 to 25 megabytes each. So that kind of solved my problem. Is the reason I can't do it more often is just I would have to drastically increase how much I pay per month to do that, and I don't think it's worth it for just the audio version, when I would much rather people go and watch the video version, which I can host on YouTube or my personal site and has so much more to it. So that's just like some ideas I had with the Digression Bar. It's gonna be a lot of just like small tweaking things. I think what I'd like to do next is I want to keep working on the site with a couple small improvements, because I think what I'm going to do is hopefully this week, if I get everything else done, I'm going to open up the site for users to join. Like that's something that if you aren't aware on that site is you have the ability to join, make an account, and that's what lets you comment. And there's a whole bunch of other features down the line I want to add, but right now it's mainly just to comment or to submit questions coming up. And I had that off, or at least rather I have to manually review everyone who joins, just because I didn't want it to be like, oh, I forgot to turn off admin functionality for all users by default. Now these 4 people could just go wipe my site or something. I want to make sure I kind of had that sorted out. But that's kind of my goal for the week, is I want to get that done. I want to get the OSRS blind going again, because that's something that's not too hard to record. I'd say the hardest part of it is maybe getting a good idea and making sure it will work, and then just scheduling time to have someone come over and do the thing. Like that's probably the hardest part of actually doing it. The editing it is fairly trivial compared to something like the hour-long podcast. So I want to get that going. I want to get the site going, and then I'm thinking hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks, I really want to start trying to change the look of the site. Because right now, I like the look of the site, but it's pretty raw, like default Drupal 8. And even though I like it, it's good and it matches my color scheme, I want to make it more custom. I don't want it to be like, oh, I recognize that you just had all this stuff out of the box. Or just the fact there's a lot of small things that I need to get a little bit better at CSS in order to fix. Like if you go over to the series page on the website, you'll see that I have a grid and it'll show all these different series and their thumbnails. Now the problem with that is the grid has no padding in between the columns. So one picture goes completely up flush to the next picture, and so does the text. So even though technically that is correct, I'm not telling it to do something else, it's something that if I could go in with CSS, I would love to fix. There's a ton of small stuff like that all over the site that I just need to go in, do like a small couple pixel perfect changes, and then down the line I need to really streamline it for mobile, because The mobile is supported, but it is definitely, with the way I have it set up right now, it needs a ton of work because of just how it sorts things. Like on that same thing with those grids work very well on the desktop version of the site because you can see everything and it's all high def and stuff. But on a phone, all of a sudden you have these 4 really tiny thumbnails and a ton of text that's like in this column that's like 4 characters wide and it's unreadable. And I think I can split the site off into like a mobile version and a desktop version, but that's a whole thing I gotta undertake. And the site is going to be something I'm gonna be working on constantly for years. So I'm sure I'll be talking about that a lot. So yeah, looking forward for this week. I don't think I'm gonna actually put any videos out just because I wanna make sure I need to get the podcast rolling properly. That's something that's not something I wanna get behind on. 2, I wanna get the OSRS stuff blind going again because I wanna make that kind of a pillar of the channel. That's something where like I'm not the biggest RuneScape guy. I mainly enjoy it because I can play it while I edit or while I do other things. Like I know there's plenty of times where if you see me playing, I'm probably ironing, honestly, while I do it. But that series, I think, has legs. Like, I think, honestly, in my opinion, there is definitely not enough content creators for that community. So I think coming with this, like OSS Blind, that's something I think there's not really anything else quite like it in that space. And I think even if it's not something I'm 1,000% passionate about, like this is my calling, I think it's a fun series to make. It's not a huge undertaking like a podcast, and I think it has a very good chance of helping the channel grow. So that's why it's kind of important that I got to get that going, and I want to get a consistent schedule. I guess that's the thing that I want, is I need to get back on podcast every other Friday, OSRS Blind every so often. I would really like to do that Resident Evil stuff, and just have that keep constantly going while doing these side projects. If I can achieve that, and I can do that for a couple months, and then I can start building other stuff, I think that's what I need to do for the channel. So, high hopes. We'll see how much of that I actually get done this week, because things always just seem to come up, or sometimes I end up being lazy. But, as always, you can contact me over my Twitter's @Grant. As always, you can contact me over on Twitter. It's @taken4GrantD. Or you can actually email me at grant@taken4grantd.com, which I set up for the podcast and should be working now if you prefer email. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.